It is episode 44 of the On the Air podcast. After a little hiatus post Thanksgiving, we are back into the swing of things. This will be a little weird schedule because we have an episode this week. At some point between now and the new year, I'll release the year in review, and then we'll get back to having guests on regularly. But today's guest is a guy who I've been following for the past couple of years. Graduated from Syracuse. Started with the LA Clippers as their radio play-by-play voice, still does that. In fact, that's what he'll be doing tomorrow night. But he's done a number of other things, including working with the Tennis Channel, did some Olympics last year, does some college basketball work for Fox. He's going to do the Nickelodeon NFL Kids Cast for the second year in a row sometime in January. And it's great to have Noah Eagle on. Noah, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, Aiden, pleasure to be on. Appreciate you having me on. And I really think I need you to just start writing my resume down from now on, because that was impressive. You rattled it off without even batting an eye. Not to mention, you have me on the 44th episode, the Q Sky. I'm pumped now. That's a sacred number in Central New York. So I'm honored.
Do you need a resume written up? I mean, you have so much. I didn't even mention the SEC on CBS. A number of the other things that I'm sure I'm leaving out. Do you even need a resume at this point? I would think your hands are kind of full.
School. That's a side project, passion project. Listen, I know who to call. Let's put it that way. From now on, I know who I need to call whenever I need that done. So I appreciate it. But yeah, it's been a fun ride, and I'm glad that we'll be able to kind of chat about it and hear a little bit more about you as well.
What's your schedule like these days? I know that football is basically over for you, and now you're kind of moving into basketball. What's the schedule look like? Maybe a little bit less now with the break coming up for the holidays, but what does the schedule look like between balancing the Clippers, and I'm sure you'll get some other NBA assignments and college basketball? What does it look like?
Yeah, I think it's just like anything else in life. It's all about your time management, how you handle that, and how you can prepare ahead. And look, many people who are aware of me, are aware of where I came from, in the sense that my dad has been in the business my entire life. And so I saw him every single day, essentially just lock himself into his office and do work and prepare for the games. And I think, look, Aiden, you know this because you do it. And anybody else who has done it or tried to in the past knows there's a lot more that is required in this job than just showing up day of the game, showing up for the game, and rattling everything off. It requires copious notes. It requires very clear preparation to make sure that you do have all the information. And quite frankly, you have more information than you could ever need. And so when you're doing multiple assignments, you just got to make sure that you're dedicating the proper amount of time to each one. And you brought up the SEC on CBS. That was something new that I added to the schedule this year. And so it required a little bit of an adjustment for me. I knew that, okay, Clippers wise, I'm around the team all the time. I know what I'm going to get from them. I know exactly what I need. I'm in my third year now, so I kind of have to prepare. Is there something maybe that I've done in the past that I know I'm never going to use in a game? And even though I would like to have it with me, I'm okay to go without it. You have to weigh the pros and cons of everything. And so but I think that's true with anything in life. If you are, let me just take a random occupation. If you're a carpenter, and I apologize to any carpenters out there. I didn't try to make you sound random. You're not. I couldn't do anything you do. I wish I had the skills that you have. I don't. I can't even build Legos. So thank you for what you do. But if you're a carpenter and you have multiple houses to get to, let's say, you have multiple places to be in a week, you got to know how much time you can budget to each place to make sure that you complete all your tasks by the end of the week. To me, it's no different with broadcasting. It just requires the preparation. And then once you're there, you're there. And you know this, Aiden, when you get there, the adrenaline's pumping, you're ready to go. You just let it flow.
Has that been kind of a thrown into the heat of the flames to start your career the past few years? Because I feel like you always think of college as kind of getting you ready for the real world. You got probably one of the busiest schedules of just about anybody around, much more than any other student that's went to Syracuse that's in the real world now. But has that kind of been a little crazy the first few years of your career, having flying out so many times each week and prepping and having these odd hours?
Yeah, I do think it's, to your point, the way it happened for me was, hey, there's no time to even think about it. It's just go. And it's hit the ground running and go. I got the job with the Clippers essentially right after I graduated was when it was offered to me. I didn't move out for a couple months. So I had really that summer after my senior year back home, spend the time with my family, with my friends. I was working a couple things in New York City and around. I had gone to Summer League, I'd gone to the Junior NBA Championship. So I was starting to get into the rhythm a little bit. And then once I moved out to LA, I essentially started right away. We went to training camp and we were off and running from there. And I didn't stop until the NBA got paused with the COVID pandemic. And so I don't even know if I look at it as crazy in terms of what I was doing. I knew what I was going to be doing. I think anybody who gets into this, once you start to do it a little bit, you understand what's going to be required of you, and you understand that it's going to be craziness pretty much all the time. That's what we like about it. That's what I like about it. You never know how any day is going to end up. Every day is going to be different, and every day is going to be exciting. It's an adventure. And I've definitely gotten that feeling now in my 3 years doing it. The crazy part has definitely been the pandemic aspect of it and how that has forced us to change the way we do things. I mean, I did a Clipper game from a hotel room last year when I was doing the Nickelodeon game. I was just calling the game in my room because I didn't want to miss it. And I had to be in New Orleans ahead of time with the COVID protocols and all that stuff. But if someone was walking past and they just heard, oh, Serge Ibaka, like someone must have thought I was the biggest Serge Ibaka fan in the world. Like who likes him that much? Maybe some people probably do. He's a very popular player. But with that being said, I think that was the biggest adjustment was, okay, how can I still do my job well without having all the resources and all of the normalcy that you come to expect doing the job, not being in an arena for all of the road games last year up until the second round of the playoffs. It was just different, not being in the bubble when the team is there, having no feel for what's going on. You just got to figure it out. And I was proud of the way I handled that. I think a lot of broadcasters would agree that they were proud in how they handled it. You just got to put your head down and make it seem like it's business as usual. And my biggest goal was if anybody was in the car driving on a random Wednesday and we were playing the Portland Trailblazers in Portland, I wanted them to believe that I was in Portland too. I never wanted to acknowledge the fact, unless I absolutely had to, that I wasn't there. And there were times I had to because you're limited and you don't know exactly what's happening. But for the most part, I felt pretty good about completing that goal to the best of my ability.
So since you brought it up, I was going to ask this later, but it's kind of a natural point at this point. Why don't you give everybody a little bit of insight as to how you got the Clippers job, as to how you went through the process of applying? Because as far as I've heard, you did it while you were still in school, which is kind of a unique perspective. In your very last year as a senior in college, here you are flying out, and you had WAER and Syracuse duties as well as the academics. You kind of balanced everything. You're calling Syracuse games. You flew out 2-3 times to go interview for the Clippers, and you've got school to finish up. So why don't you kind of take us through what those final few months of Syracuse were like?
Yeah, you're all over it. You're on top of it. It was my senior year, and I want to say it was the very beginning of the second semester, maybe, or even the very end of the first. It was the very beginning of the second, now that I think about it. And we had a professor, her name's Olivia Stomsky, who was in charge of the entire sports media center at Syracuse at Newhouse, the communication school at SU. And she was still fairly active in the industry by the time she got there. And a lot of the work she had been doing was on the West Coast and from there. And so it all tied together when you, in hindsight, looked at it. But at the time, she came to me and, unbeknownst to me, came to other people and said, hey, there's a potential opportunity. Don't want to tell you what it is. I was like, okay, that's weird, but keep going. Goes, potential opportunity. Can you send me a basketball reel? I said, if you tell me what it is. She goes, not going to tell you what it is. Said it's something good, but I don't want to tell you. I said, am I being punked? Like what's happening here? But I did it. I sent it to her because I trust her, and that was that. Then she said, and also, can you send over a resume? It wasn't written as well as you would have done, but it was good enough, got the job done. And so I sent that over to her, and weeks go by, even a couple months go by, I hear nothing, you know. And so in March, I want to say right after we got back from the tournament, and the tournament for us was in Salt Lake City. So we had flown, played Baylor, and this was right before Baylor became this juggernaut that they are now. We saw the makings of that team. We lost to them, close game, back and forth the whole time in the first round. We had to stay because you have to book when you're part of a student radio station. You got to assume you're going to win and just book for the entire slate, essentially, for that first and second round. So we stayed, we watched, we had our credentials, we got to watch some great basketball, which was awesome. Flew back to Syracuse. And then about a week or so later, I was driving to a radio show I was doing, and in my car, it lights up, and I was getting a call from an LA number I didn't have. And I found that to be a little strange. No one told me that it was LA. As I told you, I didn't know what it was, but I answer the phone, and it's this booming voice, and you hear, Noah? I was like, yeah. He goes, hi, this is Nick Davis from Fox Sports West Prime Ticket, and I'm sure you're aware, but Ralph Lawler is going to be retiring. And for those who don't know, Ralph Lawler was the Clippers voice, just overall voice, I should say, for 40 years. 4 decades he was there. Loyal, very loyal, and a legend in the market. And so he was retiring at the end of that season in his 40th year, and they were looking for his replacement. And without even asking me anything, he just said, so we'd like to fly you out next week to interview and audition. Again, to your point, I'm still a senior. I'm still in my second semester finishing up. And so for the second time in this story, I actually may have audibly said, am I being punked? Because I didn't think that I was like, what, how, why, who, all the 5 W's. They were all included in my head. And so I was looking in the back seat, nothing. So finally I said, oh yeah, great. Okay, sounds good. So put them in contact with my agent. They figure out the flights and the logistics of everything. I flew out to LA. I did the interview. It's about an hour and a half at the Clippers business facility downtown, right near Staples Center. We walked over to the TV, and keep in mind, this was for the TV job. We walked over to the TV station, their offices. I did the audition with Corey Maggette, player I grew up enjoying and watching, and got to pick his brain a whole ton about a variety of topics. And he's a great guy. And so I do that, talk a little bit more on the TV side of things with some of those folks. And then I walked out. I went to PF Chang's because I like Chang's spicy chicken and the crispy green beans. And so I did both of that. It was actually the NFL draft was that night, and I'm a long-suffering Jets fan, so I watched them take Quinnen Williams, which was a good pick. So I was watching that from, I think, the PF Chang's bar, and then I went to the airport and took a red eye back to Syracuse to get back for an exam. So I'm back at Syracuse. My agent reaches out and says, hey, Steve Ballmer would like to meet you, the owner of the team. I said, when? He said, next week. I said, where? He said, Seattle. I said, I'm going to be racking up miles. Like, my status is going to skyrocket from this stuff. Salt Lake City, LA, Seattle in successive trips. I mean, couldn't have asked for more in terms of my priority status. So I make the trip to Seattle, do the interview with Steve, which was about 90 minutes again, just one-on-one with one of the most interesting, like, he is to me the Dos Equis guy. He's the most interesting man in the world. It's just, he's fascinating all around. And so to be in the room with him was already crazy enough. To have a legitimate back and forth conversation, which is exactly what it was. It was a back and forth. He was asking me genuine questions. I was asking him genuine questions. And I think we both got a lot out of it. And so I left both these interviews. I took another red eye back to Syracuse after that one in Seattle, and I left both of them and felt pretty good. And I'll be honest with you, Aiden, I went into all of that process, the whole process, and said, whatever happens, happens. Like, I've already feel like I'm coming out on top just by getting the experience. And I think that mindset and that thought process really helped me to just go be myself, because I didn't put too much stress on it, too much weight on my shoulders. I just looked at it as, this is an awesome opportunity to see what it's like. Even if I don't get it now, in the future, I'm going to know what it's like, and I'm good. I'm good either way. And I truly felt that way. And so I flew back to Syracuse, finished the last couple of weeks, graduated. I then went to, the day after graduation, I flew to Chicago There was some NBA stuff going on, and I had been working a little bit with them with the summer league stuff. And so I went with them to the G League it was the G League Elite Camp. So it was the combine before the combine and the draft lottery. It was all happening in Chicago. So I went. I actually saw Lawrence Frank there, who I've known since he was with the Nets back in the day. And so he's now our president of basketball operations with the Clippers. Saw him, which was, I thought, another good omen almost of, okay, that's good timing, interesting. Flew back to Syracuse, packed all my stuff up, drove back to New Jersey, where I'm from. And about 2 days later, got the call that they were going to move Brian Seaman up, who was the radio guy to TV. That would leave the radio open. They'd like for me to take it. They said, take your time, take the weekend. I was thinking, like, take the weekend? I'm good now. I can tell you right now. But I played it off. I said, absolutely. Yep, we'll do. Let me consult my people and let you know. And so I called them back, I would say Sunday night, and said, I'm good to go. You got me. And they were excited. I was equally, if not more excited. And here I am 3 years later, and I'm still rolling. So that's a good sign.
Outside of obviously your dad and your mom, who were your people? Who did you call to ask if you should take the job?
Yeah, I mean, that was mostly, I talked to my family about it just to make sure this was the right move, which I think we all agreed pretty quickly it was going to be the right move. And, it all came down to good timing and getting fortunate. Obviously, knowing the professor that I did, it doesn't hurt. My last name doesn't hurt in that sense, because I think they had a little extra trust knowing that I was around it growing up because I was so young. But the way I looked at it at the time, and I still feel this way now, is I wanted to make sure I was going to do a great job every single night, because anytime anyone tuned in, I wanted them to realize that young people can do it. If you can do it, you can do it. And there are plenty of young broadcasters out there that are just as talented, if not more talented than I am, and deserve those types of chances. And so if I could pave that way for anybody in the near future, then I feel like I did my job. And so that was really why I was so excited for the job, was for that reason. I felt like it was a good opportunity to potentially lay some groundwork moving forward.
So you had mentioned that this happened at the very end of your senior, I mean, midway through with the NCAA tournament. You're in March and you're graduating in June. Had you given any other thought? You had mentioned this was kind of never seemed true until it actually happened. Had you given any thought to what you were going to do after college? Did you look into some jobs, or was this kind of the only thing you ended up looking at just because it was the first thing that presented itself?
Yeah, I mean, I had kind of had some ideas and had some preliminary talks on some other things. I always envisioned myself being from just outside New York City, about 25 minutes away. I just always envisioned that after college, I would live there. My parents lived there. My sister now lives there. Like, that's what most people, as you know, from the Northeast, that's just kind of the way it goes, is okay, you graduate college, you move to the city, you try to figure it out. So that was kind of my idea, was I was just going to figure it out. I'd been working with Sirius XM through my senior year of college. I was doing that show with this week. And then as I finished college, I was getting a lot more work with them. And so that whole summer I was doing a ton of stuff for them. And I was like, okay, I could do that. I can do this. If that's what opportunity is going to present itself, I'd be okay with that. I enjoyed it. I liked the people I worked with. So that to me was kind of where it was starting to form. And then I had some other stuff in the area that was in the works, but this one was an opportunity I obviously couldn't pass up. Being in LA always intrigued me. I love New York, and New York will always be number one in my heart, but I was definitely intrigued by the possibilities in LA as someone who loves TV, music, movies, and pop culture in general. Being able to combine the two has always been, sports and entertainment has always been a goal of mine. And so where better to do that than in the entertainment capital of the world, where they also love their sports teams. And so it just felt like a sign that I had to go and try it, had to give it a go. And so far it's been fun. It's been a nice ride. But yeah, I think that for anybody in college, a lot of kids have come to me and asked me, like, as juniors, should I be looking at jobs? I'm like, no, you should wait. You should make sure that you're going to do it at the right time. If you want to look at internships, that's one thing. But even when you're a first semester senior, there's only so much you can do. You can try to line up whatever you want, but it really doesn't begin until the point where I started getting these calls for this job anyway. Like my plan on it wasn't to really sit down and go full steam ahead and attack it until about that time anyway, about March of my senior year, because that gives you a couple months to get some things together, try to build some relationships and whatever else. So it just happened to work out that the timing did exactly how it was supposed to. But if it didn't happen, I would have tried to go for plan B, and I would have been in New York right now and probably wearing a large coat while we did this interview.
Do you still have aspirations to do more of the entertainment aspect? I know you had hosted a bunch of radio shows, obviously all that experience at WAER, and I know that you had done a lot of work later in your Syracuse career with the TV station on campus. Do you still have aspirations to kind of mix some of that stuff in, do a little more studio work, have more, I don't want to say fun. Who wouldn't want to do play-by-play? It's the most fun thing in the world, but bring in more of the TV aspect and the just fooling around in front of a cameras kind of thing.
Well, it's why I love the Nickelodeon game, is because it allows me to do a lot of that stuff. And so that is almost the perfect blend. I felt like when it was offered to me last year, it was tailor-made for me because it combined the two things that I love the most. But to answer your question, yeah, look, I think that, I get this a lot of, okay, well, what do you want to do long term? I don't know. Like I just, as long as I'm enjoying what I'm doing, which I am right now, that's all that really matters to me. If I'm happy and excited to work every day, which is what the reason I got into this was because I saw my dad and he was happy and excited to work, and that rubbed off on me. And when you've got the relationship that I had with my dad, where you want to emulate and you like to see everything he does and try to see if you could put your own spin on it, it was a no-brainer in that sense. So I love the entertainment stuff, and if those opportunities start to come, I'm not going to say no. I did a game show actually when I was in Syracuse for my junior and senior year, and it was some of the most fun I had when I was on campus. And so I would love to do that stuff again, but for right now I'm enjoying exactly what I'm doing, and as long as that's the case, I'm going to keep it rolling.
When you got to LA and you started in your first season with the Clippers, what was the initial, how did you go about distinguishing your own style of calling a game? Because I'll say what kind of everybody's thinking. You sound a lot like your dad. You look like your dad. You could be the younger version of Ian just in 2021. Yeah. How did you go about, did you feel, and I'm sure this probably goes back to Syracuse too, did you feel like you needed to kind of distinguish your own call, and how did you go about doing that?
Well, I made sure my hair was going to be more impressive, which I think I've definitely guaranteed that so far. No. There, I love it. Listen, I will say he's still got a full head of hair. It's still going strong. It still looks good. So that is his favorite bit. When he used to come back, if I had like a career day at school, he would always single out somebody in the crowd, and for some reason he would always randomly pick the quietest kid, and he would start it by saying, I get 3 questions a lot, 2 of which I'll answer for you right now. 1, is Ian my real name? Yes, it is. We can get into that at a different time. 2, is this my real hair? Yes, it is. You in the front, tug at my hair. And it was always the quietest kid who would not want to do it and feel so uncomfortable grabbing his hair. But it's real and it's spectacular, just like Seinfeld. So to answer your question, this is definitely one that I get often as well, is how to be my own person. How do I be Noah Eagle instead of Ian Eagle's son? And starting in Syracuse was definitely tough, because not only did my dad go there, it's where my parents met. And so I would say when I was first looking at schools, I did have some trepidation of, do I really want that? Do I really want to live in the footsteps of both of them the entire time that I'm going through this process? So I looked at a variety of schools. Syracuse happened to be the first school that I visited, and I liked it, but we left, and my mom, 10 minutes into the drive home, said, well, what do you think? I said, I don't know. I'm not really feeling it. She goes, okay, well, we'll look around. We'll see what else you like. I said, okay. So we visited Maryland, we visited Miami, we visited USC, UCLA, a variety of schools all over the country. And then after seeing all of those, we went back to Syracuse right before the start of my senior year of high school. And my mom said, you know what, forget their tour. Let me give you my tour. So she brings me to all the places the students would actually go and all the things I'd be doing. And then we revisited WAER and Citrus TV and some of the other facilities. They had just built stuff at Newhouse from the first time I visited to now this most recent time I visited. And we also got like the nicest day of the year. It had to have been 88 degrees, sunny. Everybody was out. Everybody was smiling. First day of classes. And they're out and about and they're doing tangible work. And so, same deal. We leave 15 minutes into the ride home. My mom turns to me and said, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, "I have to apply early decision. I have to go." She goes, "Okay, then that's what you'll do." So, sure enough, that's what I did. But with it, I still had some of those thoughts of, okay, well, how am I going to be me? So, my idea was, I'll never say my last name. I'm always just going to say, I'm Noah. It was like I was Cher or Madonna. I didn't have a second name. It was just a singular person, just a solo persona. It was like Daughtry. I went from Chris Daughtry to Daughtry, and that was it. And so I was Noah to everybody. And honestly, it was shocking how much it worked where there were times where I would meet someone and then like 2 months later, they'd be like, "Hey, are you Ian's son?" And I was like, "You just put it together?" Like the glasses, the stature, the voice, the whatever else, to your point, everything you said earlier. And so it got to the point I would say, so I did that for my first 2 years in college. I would say I was just Noah all the time. And then going into my junior year, I had interned at Bleacher Report, and there was a moment for me there that, my dad basically said, "You don't have to be ashamed. Just go be who you are. Don't worry about what anybody else thinks about it, and things are going to work out the way they should." And so I listened to his advice. While I was doing that internship, I started saying my full name, and there were people who were like, "Oh, like," well, and put it two and two together. And then when I got back to school, I kept it rolling and I kept it rolling. And I just realized the only way to build myself is to not run away from myself. And so that's what I did. And so to go back to the original question on how I built my own persona is I just have been me. I'm very similar in how I think and see the world to my dad because, well, I came from him. So naturally, it's going to be some similarities. And to your point, there are just natural similarities between the two of us. But we do have some interests that are a little bit different. We try to include what we like and what we don't like in the broadcast. And so I'm just me. And I would say that now that we're both in it, we both try to come up with calls where maybe the other one hasn't done it yet. So if he's doing a Clipper game eventually, he wants to come up with something for Luke Kennard that I haven't thought of. Or if I do a Nets game against the Clippers, I'm going to try to come up with something for Javon Carter that he hasn't thought of. And then we share, and then we exchange notes, and then we both use the other one's calls. It's pretty fun, honestly. So I haven't run away from it. I just kind of embrace it at this point.
What are some of the things that you specifically wanted to work on when you started with the Clippers? Because it's got to be pretty odd. Most people in this industry do not go from college straight to the NBA or to the Clippers or to CBS. What were some of the things you wanted to work on when you first started with the Clippers, and how did that work out on air, given that most of the time with a person who's graduated from college, you're starting in the minor leagues. It's a very minimal audience. That's kind of where you figure yourself out. What was it like kind of figuring yourself out and working on things in front of the Clippers radio audience or the SEC on CBS or Fox?
I think that in broadcasting in general, I don't care how long you've been doing it, you're always improving. You're always finding things to get better at. And I was definitely no different in that sense when I started, and I'm definitely no different now. And I think anybody would tell you, whether they are a freshman in high school and just starting it, or it's Bob Costas or Marv Albert or Al Michaels who have banked hundreds or thousands of games at this point. They always are trying to get better. The day you stop trying to get better, the day you get complacent is the day you're done. That's what everybody is. And I haven't just heard that from my dad. I've heard that from many broadcasters. The day you decide I'm a finished product is the day you retire. That's it. You're never a finished product. And so when I got to the Clippers, some specific things that I wanted to work on was overall smoothness. I felt like I had the basics down. I knew that my overall play-by-play was going to give the audience what they needed. My excitement level was going to be there. But I wanted to make sure that it sounded smooth all the time. And even a game on a Monday night against the Detroit Pistons, it was going to sound just as exciting as a game on a Friday night against the Los Angeles Lakers. So that was something of, okay, consistency was key. I wanted to make sure that I was consistent. That was priority number one, in my opinion. Priority number two was voice quality. And something I did right after I graduated from school is I worked with a voice coach, which I never thought I was going to need. And I don't know if I need it necessarily, but boy, did it help. It just helped to unlock other sounds that I'd never had when I was in college. And if you go back and compare even my senior year of college to now, it's night and day. It just sounds so much better now because I've learned how to reach different levels. And so it was huge. That was a massive, massive help. And I have recommended my voice coach to others, and they have been just as pleased. And so that was definitely a big one for me, because it's the other part of this job that I never experienced in college was doing it alone. I don't have an analyst. I do every game by myself. So speaking for that long, uninterrupted, essentially, that can wear your voice down. And I wasn't sure how I was going to react my first year before I adjusted to it. And so that was a huge help. Those were two of the biggest things I would say I was working on. And then number three, to go overarching, is you always want to make sure that you're getting better at, when I do have an analyst for some of the other stuff I do, making sure that it's a conversation and making sure that the viewer or listeners at home, they feel like they're part of it. And that just comes with more and more and more reps, and understanding how to use what you have been given, understanding how to know what your partner or partners have and draw that out of them and bring the best out of them. And so that's something I'm constantly working on and constantly figuring out, and constantly now with different personalities. Okay, how do I use this versus this? How do I do this versus that? So a couple things, but I would say consistency was always at the top of my mind of, okay, just go do a good job. And it's funny how this works. And, a lot of other broadcasters that told me this was going to happen, but my first year I was just saying, just go call a clean game. Don't worry about overdoing it. Don't worry about the calls. Just call a clean game. Now I feel like I've got it down. So what's the next step of improvement? How do I put some more pizzazz on it? How do I add my personality more consistently? How do I make someone laugh sitting next to me, my engineer or my stats person, whoever it might be? Those are things I can worry about now, because I feel like I've gotten through that consistency that I was looking for.
What is the process of critique? I know obviously you have a ton of self-critique, but what is the process that you go through after a game? And to that extent, we kind of loop in your dad. How much do you rely on him and other people who I'm sure you've met around the industry when you need a tape looked at, or you want to say, hey, listen to this game?
So I'm very fortunate in the sense that my dad, he is giving with his time to everybody. He listens and watches and critiques many people, as now I have as well. In that mantle, and as a result, he is the best springboard that I could possibly ask for when it comes to critiquing. Most of it is self-critique, because think about it, I'm doing 82 regular season games for the Clippers over the course of a season, plus preseason, plus postseason. And in between all of that, might do a college basketball game. I'm going to have a couple coming up here, or I do those college football games, or now the Nickelodeon game. And so there's all this stuff, and there's not a lot of time in between. And so for me, every Clipper game, guaranteed, the first thing I do is, once the highlights are sent to me, I listen through every single highlight and make sure, okay, what did I like from this? What did I not like? What can I improve on? What can I keep doing at the high level? And that is a huge help in general. Then I might go back the next day if I have a little time and listen to a 5-minute stretch just to see, okay, how is my flow over a longer period? But for the most part, that's it. From time to time, I'll ask my dad, what do you think of this? How do you think I phrased that? What do you think of that? The other thing I get now is, I'm still a young broadcaster, quote unquote. So bosses will give me their 2 cents still of, hey, I thought you did this really well. You can improve that. And I take it all to heart. And then I say, okay, how can I improve upon that? But that's really it for the most part for right now. I think that as the assignments keep coming and they're different and new, then that might change and I might get more opinions on it. But the other thing, it's funny. The other thing I will do is ask my friends who aren't in the industry, who don't do broadcasting, who are just the sports fans essentially, who might tune into my game and say, okay, well, did you like it? What'd you hear? And they'll give me an honest assessment usually because that's honestly just as important. And the reason for it is because that's what the common fan is going to be thinking. And so I like to do that from time to time as well.
You mentioned you had a voice coach. Do you do vocal warm-ups? That's something I've started a little bit to do. Do you do vocal warm-ups before the game?
Oh, I do vocal warm-ups. I think that I do them in my car on the way to the game at home. And so I do them as I'm pulling out my apartment complex. And I think people who look at me think that I have something wrong. Like they think something's going on in my brain because if you see my faces I'm making, no sane person would make those faces. And so I try to do them in private rather than public, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do on the road. I'll do them from the hotel room before I get on the bus, so no one has to see me in that state. But I do the warm-ups. I go all out on the warm-ups.
Would you like to demonstrate some of them right now?
Nope, that I'm not going to become a meme on your podcast. I understand that's good for business. That's bad for me. So I can't do that. No, I appreciate you asking that.
You work alone with the Clippers. I'm sure it can get a little lonely up there. What is it like just working by yourself and just sitting there and calling a game? Does it make you feel less nervous? Does it make you feel more nerves than usual, knowing that it's just you? You can't dump off to an analyst. How do you work with that?
Yeah, so the thing I normally tell people is that when someone talks to themselves on a daily basis, they're normally labeled as odd or different or crazy. I get paid to do it. So I feel like that already good step. Feel like that's very positive. It was daunting, I think, in my head when I initially was told because I had never done it. As I mentioned, it was something that you got to remember in college, I wasn't even doing necessarily full games on radio because you're switching off because you're all trying to do play by play. And so it's not like anybody's there in that program saying, I'm here to be an analyst. And that's very rare. We had a couple grad students mostly who were former athletes that said, I want to learn and then I want to become an analyst. And that I get. But the vast majority of kids that are there, they want to be on air. And a lot of those kids want to do play-by-play. And so you're switching off. And so I was only calling half football games, half of basketball games. So I was going from that where I'm only straining my voice for that long to saying, wait a second, I got to do a full 48 minutes now? Nobody else is there? What am I going to do? How am I going to fill the time? And I realized that on radio, it's not as difficult as you would think because you are talking so much to describe what's going on around you. And that's then where the preparation comes into play. I just make sure I have more than I could ever need so that in any moment I can go to something random and it's going to make sense in the flow of the game. And so I've gotten more and more into stats, and I only use stats that I feel like can be digested by everybody. I try to limit how many analytics I use. And if I use analytics, I describe it right there. So if I'm going to say they're number one in offensive rating, that means that they're number one in terms of points per 100 possessions. I'll usually explain it, or I'll just say they're number one in offense, number three in defense in the league. If it's true shooting percentage or something like, I describe it. I explain what goes into that stat after saying it. So you have to make sure you've got the time for that. The most difficult parts of doing it alone, the most difficult times, I'll say there are two instances in particular that it can get a little tough not having anybody with you. One is long reviews. When they're just at a monitor for 5 minutes straight and there's no action and they haven't taken a timeout on the floor and all you got to do is fill 5 minutes talking about them looking at a replay, that can be tough when you're doing it alone. The second one is blowout, either direction. If it's a 25-point game in the fourth quarter, start the fourth quarter. no one cares what the play-by-play is at that point. Now you got to go into entertainment mode, and you've got to entertain, especially when your team's winning by 25. So that's where I just start to pull out all the stops and just say, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. It's going to be all of me, John Legend style. You're getting every bit of me. And so we're just going full steam ahead. I start to talk about schedules. I start to talk about movies I saw recently. I start to talk about the most recent album drop. I start to talk about Mount Vesuvius. You have no idea what's coming out at that point. So that would be really the toughest two instances of not having the analyst. But I've learned to appreciate it, having a complete blank canvas and being able to paint the whole thing how I want it.
What movies have you seen recently?
Good question. I saw King Richard, the Serena and Venus Williams story, which was excellent, by the way. I have been catching up recently more so on shows. And then once I catch up on all my shows, then I shift back to movies, and I saw a yo-yo bouncing back and forth. So I've got some more recent movies to watch. The new Spider-Man just came out. I will have to see that eventually, but that's right now. My goal is to catch up on my shows, my reading, my music. Then I bounce back to movies. It's a constant balancing act that goes with the preparation. So it's all part of one whole life that we live.
Is that a lot of time on the plane where you're going to catch up on those? Because I know it's very difficult, at least for me, and I'm sure it is for you, to find time to just watch the shows. And ADHD here couldn't even focus just on the show. I usually just play it in the background. Is that kind of how you fit things in?
Plane is definitely an option as long as I don't have any work to do on the plane. So that is the best part about the plane for me of going with the team, is that we have Wi-Fi. And so with the Wi-Fi, I can get a lot of work done. So, because think about it, you're in the air, you're away from everybody. So if we have a 2.5 hour flight, I can knock out 2.5 hours of my work so that I don't have to do it when we land. Great. That's perfect. But if I've done all my work, which has happened on a couple flights this year, I will knock out now 2.5 hours worth of shows or a full movie or something. And it's another thing off my list. Now I'm caught up on that. So it's all productive to me. That's the way I look at it. If I'm watching TV, that's productive in my life because I'm going to use it, I know, eventually on the air. I'm going to make a reference to it. I'm going to be up to date on it. We're going to be able to talk back and forth about it. So that is still productive in my mind. During the pandemic in the early months, when everyone was at home for the first 3 months, I was productive beyond belief. I watched show after show, movie after movie, book after book. I was like, I'm just going to consume everything if we're just going to sit at home. So that time was great in that sense. I caught up on everything. So yes, to answer your question, the flight is time to catch up on anything you need to catch up on.
For COVID, were you mostly in LA? Because obviously midway through you had to travel to the, well, you weren't in the bubble, but you had to travel back to do games from the studio. But were you mostly at home in New Jersey, or were you mostly in LA?
So for the first 3 months, so we got shut down. The NBA got shut down, was it March 11th or so, March 12th, one of those days. We had a game the day before. I think it was the 11th. I want to say we played the 10th in Golden State and flew home that night. And this was when things were starting to ramp up around the country. And Doc Rivers, who was still coaching us at the time, texted all of us and said, San Francisco is the worst city in terms of COVID rate so far at this point. And this, again, was very early. Worst city in terms of COVID rate in America right now. So we're going to go in, get a win, get out. Don't leave the hotel. Don't go to dinner. Don't do anything. Just we're getting in, getting a win, getting out. So that's what we did. We won the game, flew back to LA. And that following day, I was at the gym at my apartment, and I got the alert that Rudy Gobert tested positive. And I was watching then everything just completely unfold, and the tailspin began. And I was thinking, oh no. I mean, the craziest part is, we were just talking about this the other day. We thought at that point, and I think a lot of Americans thought this, that day we're like, oh yeah, 2 weeks, we'll be good. We'll be back on the road. We'll be playing again, no problem. And it was not 2 weeks. In fact, that 2 weeks went by, and that's when I went home to New Jersey. So I go home for 3 months. And then I came back in June of 2020 to LA because tennis was starting back up again. And so I did a month of tennis, then the bubble, and then we lost in the second round in 7 games to Denver, sore subject still. But as a result, I got to go to Paris for the French Open. So that was crazy because that was in the middle of COVID too. So I was a little bit all over the place. But then once I got back from Paris, I was basically in LA and everything was very much closed, and it was odd. It was an odd time to be anywhere. And yeah, now that we're traveling again, it's starting to feel a little more close to normal, but we're still a little ways away.
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be pretty freaky between getting the text from Doc Rivers. I'm sure you don't get those every day, especially as the broadcaster. I'm sure you don't get those every day. And then when you went to Paris, I'm trying to remember, there were big COVID issues at the French Open, weren't there? That was 2020 still. That's got to be pretty. I mean, that's got to be pretty scary. And between that and the Doc Rivers text and traveling across the country, that's got to be kind of a traumatic experience almost.
Yeah, it was just crazy in general because it was so unknown. And when I went back to Jersey again, I didn't think I was going to be there for 3 months. I thought, oh, okay, maybe a couple weeks I'll come back, no problem. And it was great in the sense that I actually got to be around my family for 3 months, and don't really get to see them as much as I used to, obviously, because we're on different sides of the country. And at that point, I had barely seen them. I was full steam ahead, as mentioned. I moved out, we started working, and that was that. And so now we're all doing our separate stuff. And so that part of it was great. It was like found money on the side of the road that I got to be around them, and we got to hang out every day, and we were just a family at home. And that was that. And that's just unlikely given my schedule and my dad's schedule to maybe even ever happen again. And so that part of it was good. But the fact that it was 3 months is still crazy to me. The fact that I went back and everything was closed, and that's still crazy to me. The fact that I went to Paris and it was bizarre. I mean, people were there and out and about, but you couldn't really go out. They had a curfew. And if you were out past the curfew, you got arrested and put in jail. And I didn't want to go to French jail. I don't know French. I know un poquito de español. I can't do French. All right. If I went to jail in Paris, that would not have ended well. That's when it would have been traumatic, to answer your question. This was okay. I think I dealt with it just like everybody else. But had I gone to a Parisian prison, not handling that.
But last question about COVID, and then we'll talk a little bit more about broadcasting. But with everything that is going on as we record this, they just moved a couple of NFL games. The NBA, as far as I know, has not had too many issues yet, but I know that Canadian hockey teams are starting to go less and less fans. Everything's kind of feels like it might be on the verge of this. Have you seen anything change at all with the NBA? Has anything felt different or been different this year than it has?
I mean, the protocols are still the protocols. So that stuff is still different than a normal season. You know, I almost forget what it was like before because I only got so much time. Our season began October 22nd, 2019. I'll never forget the day because we played the Lakers to open the season, and it was one of the craziest experiences I ever had as a broadcaster. It was just an unbelievable with the two teams after great off seasons, high expectations. It was amazing. So we started October 22nd. And so what? October, November, December, January, February, and half of March. So like 5.5 months I had that first season of just what it really is like. I can't even remember it anymore. Now I'm just used to what it's currently like. We wear masks, testing, still some protocols. It's way better than it was last year, where I wasn't even allowed close to the players last year. I had to stay when we were at home in a separate area entirely. We could not go down. Now we can go back down. We can go back to our media room. We see people that I was working with every day my first year, and I didn't see for a full calendar year. So that part of it to me is my favorite of this season, is rekindling all those relationships that we missed last year. That part of it has been outstanding.
Last question I want to ask before the final three that I ask everybody. You had touched on the Nickelodeon stuff a little bit earlier, given that they just announced it again. What was it like the first time And what can we expect now, especially since I think it's going to be even better with fans this time. Before it was in the Superdome, it was empty. You made it as good as possible. But what's going to change this year now that there's going to be hopefully a full house?
Yeah. I think that just in general, first of all, appreciate the kind words. And to answer the first part of the question, I had a blast. We all had a blast. We similar to how I felt about doing these Clipper games alone. It was a blank canvas for all of us because this had never been done before. And so we felt like we could do no wrong. We just got to go do it the way we believe it should sound. And so that's what our mindset was going in. And Nate Burleson and I looked at each other beforehand. We just said, let's do it. Let's just have as much fun as possible. Let's suspend that part of our mind and just go and be ourselves, all for a full 60-minute game. And I think we expected that people would like it because we had seen all the elements. We kind of knew what to expect ourselves. I don't think we knew how much people would like it and how well received it would be. And the text that we were getting, he got one from Kurt Warner, whose son is an adult but has had issues through his life. And Kurt told him, and this was maybe the coolest text we got, and we had a couple like it, but he said that it was the first game his son ever watched from start to finish. And it was just because of all the sensory stuff and everything that went within the slime, and it just kept his attention. And so that was when I knew we accomplished what we set out to accomplish. Was we have fun, then everybody else has fun. And so to shift to this year, now that we know what to expect, now that we know how it goes, and by the way, everything I just said, all the credit goes to everybody that planned for a full calendar year, essentially, to make sure this thing was going to go well. Sean Robbins, who was in charge of it all, put together a great team. Ken Mack, longtime producer. Suzanne Smith, who has just been unbelievable in her career as a director. So that the whole team going down the list of everybody was perfect for it. And they had the vision. And so we just had to go out and execute their vision. They were essentially the coaching staff and we were the players, and that was it. And so this year, I think it's like the second year of having the same coaching staff and players, and everybody's familiar with each other, and everybody knows the playbook now, and everybody knows the game plan. And so we can raise our level. We can take it to a new level. And you said the fans will be in the building. That just adds energy. That adds more of an environment as well. I don't know if it changes our mindset at all, though. Our mindset's going to be the same. We just want to go have fun. And if we have fun, we know everybody else will too.
Last three questions that I ask everybody, and then we'll get you back to your game day eve prep. Broadcaster you've always wanted to meet, dead or alive, and I'm sure that you have a whole list that you've gotten to meet, given who your father is and that you grew up with him taking you to games, but broadcaster that you've always wanted to meet that you never got to meet, living or dead.
So I'm going to say Marty Glickman. And Marty Glickman is essentially the godfather of Syracuse broadcasting. My dad knew him and considered him a mentor. And the stories I've heard about him are legendary. And so with that, he was essentially the first domino because he went to Syracuse, Olympian, broadcaster for the Knicks and for so many other places, and a legend, an absolute legend. There's an HBO documentary about him. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend checking it out. But he went to Syracuse. As a result, Marval grew up listening to him. He decides to go to Syracuse. Then Bob Costas says, wait, I like this guy. He goes to Syracuse. Then Sean McDonough, then Mike Tirico, then my dad. It was the domino, and he was the first one that set it off. So that would be my answer.
One thing that you have to have for game day when you're on the air could be something like cough drops, could be a piece of prep. One thing that you can't call a game without.
Water, I would say. I am someone who drinks a lot in general. And so when I don't get enough water, I can't do it. I can't rise to the occasion. And so it was a problem my first year because I was doing the pre and post game on TV. So I would do our radio pregame starts an hour before the game, hour before tip. I would do the first segment or so with our host. Then I would run down to the court, and our TV pregame was 30 minutes. I would do the TV pregame, run back to the position for radio, call the first half, do halftime on TV, call the second half, do postgame on TV. So it was like 4.5 hours where I could not use the bathroom. And so I had to ration my water. It was difficult to do. Before, after, I would do it so that I would be just like, after the game, I was chugging essentially. I was drinking more than any human should ever drink. It was as if I was taking a drug test and I was making certain I was going to pass that drug test. And now that I don't do that anymore for the Clippers, I can actually use the bathroom at halftime. But my problem with that is because I drink so much water, and most of the time our radio setups are near where the fans are, and it's near the concourse. So the bathroom I use is right near the concourse. The first half ends, I quickly toss it back to our host, and then I am booking it to that bathroom to make sure I get there early and I don't have to stand in a long line. I'm shoving like 7-year-olds out of my way. I might have some sort of assault lawsuit on my mind. I mean, on my on my docket coming on. Definitely not on my mind, although maybe my subconscious is telling me something, because I do whatever it takes. By any means necessary, I am getting to the bathroom and I am getting back as quick as possible. But with all that being said, water is absolutely number one on my list of what I need. Number two is a protein bar at halftime. Cannot do a game without it. Guaranteed.
Last question that I like to ask everybody, and you're a real good guy to ask about this, the advice that you have to young broadcasters, and I'm sure you get plenty of it, plenty of opportunities to give it, but what is the advice that you always give to those that want to get into the industry or looking to do this in college, want to get started as a play-by-play broadcaster?
There are so many directions I could go with that. And there's so much advice I've been given over my short time now and my journey. I'll say two things in particular. The first one is, don't believe that one person's path has to be yours. Everybody in this industry has a completely different way of getting to where they have. And so if you're watching someone and saying, well, they're doing this, this, and this, I should be doing this, this, and this, you don't necessarily have to do it that way. You can look at so many examples of people who have made it to a very high position in our business, and they did it their own way. I'm not trying to go full Frank Sinatra on you, but they just did it in a different manner that maybe isn't as cookie cutter as you had in your mind. So don't get pigeonholed and don't get stuck in your mind on, I have to do it this way, because you don't have to do it that way. You have to do it your way, which is more important. The second thing, and somewhat along those lines, is never lose sight of who you are. Always be yourself, because when the second you're not being genuine, and the second you're trying to put on this facade, you're trying to be someone that you're not, people will notice, people will recognize it. And if you watch any of your favorite broadcasters in any aspect of the profession, sports, entertainment, news, politics, the ones that are the best are the ones that feel like they're right there with you. I think Mike Tirico is the most versatile and one of the most talented broadcasters currently in the business. And the reason that I and many people feel that way is because when he is on camera, when he is doing any position, whether it's hosting, whether it's interviewing, whether it's play-by-play, it feels like it's so natural. And it feels like that's the only place he wants to be. And it's because that's who he is. He loves it genuinely. He came back. I remember my sophomore year was when the Cubs and Cleveland, now the Guardians, were playing the Game 7 of the World Series. And the Cubs were trying to break a long streak. Cleveland was trying to essential curse of being a Cleveland sports team. And Game 7's happening. Mike happened to be back, and he took all of the radio station, WAER, out. So it was 30-something of us, maybe. And we all went and we got food at Varsity, which is a legendary spot in Syracuse. And they had the game on the TV. And I just remember Mike is in the middle, he's in the middle of everybody, and he's talking about something that someone asked him, I'm assuming. And he's in the middle of this long story talking about something that happened years ago, maybe with him and Hubie Brown, let's say. And I just vividly remember at the corner of his eye, he sees something's about to happen in the game. And so let's say he's talking, blah, blah, blah. He's talking, he literally, like, it was insane, like a robot. He like torqued his head, looked up at the screen, paused. He said, sorry, always have to lay out for action. I'm like, lay out for action? But he genuinely loves sports. He genuinely loves competing, and he loves the feeling you get with it. And so all of that shines through, right? So to go back to the advice portion, you have to find that for you. For me, it's incorporating all the other stuff I love, the movies, the TV, the music. That's what I love. That's what makes me me. So I'm going to keep doing it, using sense of humor, using anything else that makes me me. I'm not going to shy away from that. And as a result, I feel like it's worked out. And a lot of kids, they try to be like their favorite sportscaster, which isn't a bad thing, but you just have to blend that. You can be like them while also keeping the essence of you.
If people want to hear a game you're calling and find you online, where can they do that?
I am at NoEagle15 on Instagram and Twitter. I don't know what people prefer. I am on TikTok. I've never posted, and remains to be seen whether I will. That is potentially in the future, but who knows? Who knows? I mean, I don't even know what I'm going to have for dinner, so I got to figure that out first.
I think we need to get your dad on TikTok. I know he won't even get on Twitter, but I think he would become the star of TikTok. Iron Eagles TikTok would be the go-to place.
Listen, I can try to work my magic, but my magic is nowhere near David Blaine, so it's more like David Lame, and I don't think it's going to work. So I can try, but I can't make any promises.
Well, Noah, thanks so much for being the guest on episode 44. I know you said Syracuse guy, very important number. Go Orange, go Clippers, go SEC, go CBS, go Fox. Appreciate you jumping on and spending some time. And given that this is probably going to end up releasing on Christmas Eve, Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and thanks for joining us.
Aiden, same to you, man. Appreciate you having me, and hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Of course.